Hi, I'm James McGuire, and today we're talking about the relationship between the Chief Information Officer and the Chief Marketing Officer, and how the nature of that relationship, if it goes well, can boost the process of digital transformation. To discuss that, I'm joined by four major industry thought leaders. With me is Tiffany Bova, Global Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. Hello to you, Tiffany.
Thanks for having me. I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with so many of you that I know from social media, but this is our first to get together, so I'm thrilled to be here.
And Miles Sewer is the CIO Chat Facilitator Extraordinaire and eWEEK contributor and Director of Solutions Marketing at Elation. Miles, you're busy as always.
I am absolutely busy, but thrilled to be with you this afternoon.
Mm-hmm. Kimberly Whitler is the Associate Professor of Business Administration at the University of Virginia. Kim, hello to you.
Hi, James. Great to be here. Really looking forward to the discussion.
And rounding out our panel is Jay Farrow, the CIO of ERT, a global data and technology company. Hello to you, Jay.
Thanks for having me, James. Great to be here with such a great panel.
Great. So I've got some questions, but before we get started, I want to thank everyone who's viewing and listening. I totally appreciate you showing up. We welcome your questions, your comments. You don't need to wait until the end. Put your comment in the Q&A box at any time. This is the internet. Let's all interact with each other. All right, so let's get a portrait of where we are now. What are the key areas of alignment between CIOs and CMOs? Is this relationship highly functioning in most cases, or are there trends pulling it apart? Kim, what do you see?
Well, so I have to put on my academic hat for a second. Even though I'm a former CMO, for a second, I'll put on my academic hat. And I think
that's allowed.
So, the way that I've investigated this is really looking at it from a management perspective. And so my answer would be, it depends. There are areas, and it's almost by company, whether or not it's working really well together or it's not working well together. And some of the drivers of that are the way in which management, and I say here the CEO, has structured the relationship, how they incentivize the two to collaborate and work together. So, that's kind of the domain that I come at this from. How do you try to motivate and incentivize the two to work together? How do you create the structures and the processes to make that happen? And so in my research, what I see is it depends. It varies by company. And it's not a matter of, are there areas from my perspective that's working well? It's whether or not in a specific company, are they getting it to work effectively together?
Miles, what do you see in terms of the CIO and CMO relationship? Is it generally a high functioning relationship?
It should be. I mean, I think in cases where it's not working, you suddenly see this thing appear called the Chief Digital Officer, who's trying to be something in between. But I believe the numbers are that roughly 53% of things that the CIO is working on in terms of initiatives are coming in support of marketing. So if it's not highly functional, there's a problem. And then you've got the other problem is that if these things aren't working together, if you don't have a great digital strategy, your company life may get shorter and shorter. So all of these things are important.
Is that CDO title widespread these days? You said it's sort of in between the two, but are there really a lot of CDOs in the wild?
There are chief data officers in the wild. There aren't a lot of chief digital officers, but what I'm hearing is that the times that you have somebody become a chief digital officer is because marketing and IT aren't able to get their agendas together. I don't think the chief digital officer should be a long-term role, and the analysts are kind of saying that as well. But I think they're occurring where marketing can't think digitally about the customer relationship or the journey, and where you also have IT who can't speak in the language of business. So it's an indicative, in my view, of a failure.
Tiffany, your sense of the CIO CMO relationship, is it working these days?
But I have a sort of unique perspective. Prior to joining Salesforce, I was a research fellow at Gartner, and I was part of the team that made that prediction that said the chief marketing officer would spend more on technology than the chief information officer. And it was like blasphemy across the industry. But lo and behold, many companies, Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce, Oracle, bought companies, right, to go after that sort of CMO spend on a technology front. And so that was 13 years ago-ish, probably 16, 17, we saw that kind of come true. So the good news is I feel like the bridge is much better than it was in the beginning when marketing was kind of trying to wrangle more tech decisions out of the hands of CIOs because they were moving too slowly. And so now this connection point is really, really tighter than I think it's ever been. We just launched our new State of Marketing report on Wednesday of this week, actually. And the number one priority for CMOs is innovation. And number two is connecting and communicating, collaborating with customers in real time. There's no way to do that without the CIO's involvement. So I think that we've come a long way. To Miles' point, some new roles, Chief Customer Officer, Chief Digital Officer, Chief Engagement Officer, right, to kind of try to play the in-between, but I don't know necessarily if that is required at this point.
Mm-hmm. Something you said in there was interesting. You talked about this, the CIO is moving too slowly. What is it that causes that slower movement?
Well, I think because of when I said that, right? We're backing up to when they were still trying to, have lunch with their servers. They didn't necessarily want to put it out into this thing called the World Wide Web, right? That was a lot of very different conversations. And it was kind of similar with the CMO, right? Like we own technology, we're responsible for delivering it. The CMO is like, look, our customers and our business is moving so fast. And you have to go through this long RFP process, which is where a lot of SaaS companies were born, selling directly to the BU leaders in sales and in marketing, right? Because CIOs were saying, nope, we've got this 25-year-old, system that is not as flexible and agile as we need it to be. And so marketing and sales just went out and bought their own technology. And I don't think that sort of shadow IT is happening, right? Because I think that the pace and relationships, and to Kim's point, right, the CEO really directing that kind of integration and collaboration has come a long way over the last decade.
Jay, you are a CIO. I mean, what's your sense of the CIO CMO relationship?
I'm going to go ahead and disagree with Tiff. I'm kidding, Tiffany. No, I agree. I agree with everything everybody said. I think Miles hit on something. I think the advent of the chief digital officer is a symptom of a broken relationship or a broken focus. Mm-hmm. I have yet to see a company with a highly functioning CIO/CTO and CMO who are in a collaborative relationship where a CDO, in this case digital, was necessary. And I think we're now looking at a different generation of CIO, many of who, quote, get it, than we did 20 years ago, who, to Tiffany's point, still were having lunch with their servers. And by the way, Tiffany, they make great company from time to time. And the room is nice and cool. So every now and then I'm kidding. I have never had lunch with a server.
It'd be a rather boring conversation, wouldn't it?
Well, I think the server would get probably the short end of the stick having a conversation with me, probably. But what I find interesting is I did a little research in advance of the conversation. And one study found that only 23% of companies have a self-reported, very effective CMO-CIO working relationship. And I found that number to be really, really low, 23%. I think back to my relationships at AIG and other companies I've been, and I've always had really good relationships. And I think part of that is MarTech wanting to move, or marketing wanting to move, to Tiffany's point, at light speed, the CIO not used to that. I put a lot of blame on the CIO as well. I put a lot of the blame on our own role. We love to play victim. We love to Tiffany's point, hug our servers and kind of get mired in the day-to-day. And I think we're seeing that change, but I think we still have a lot of work to do in the CIO ranks to reach out and upskill ourselves.
All right. So speaking of that work to do, how should that work be done? I mean, what recommendations would you provide to CIOs on building a CMO relationship, or the other way around? Miles, your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about it in the CIO chat. It's really, really important to build partnership relationships and to treat, the internal group as a partner, but also to have a point of view. I mean, not all CMOs are going to have a perspective on where technology is now, but I think the other thing that's really important is language. Speaking in business language about business problems is critical. Don't be talking bits and bytes. I think, Jay will obviously confirm this from his experience, but if CIO has to be outward facing. In fact, we had a chat recently where one of the CIOs said, and I don't remember which one it was, so I'm sorry, I'm not giving you credit, but said, if you're not, totally focused on business problems, then you're not going to be a CIO for very much longer. And if anything, COVID's accelerated this.
I totally agree. I think as a CIO, it is incumbent on you to remember that you are a business executive first and a technology executive second. I wear both hats, the CIO and the CTO at ERT. And so there's double the responsibility in terms of remembering why we exist, and that's for our customers. And so the notion of embracing the seamless customer journey and having unparalleled customer experience, and that starts and finishes, I think, with the CIO being a part of it, and as well as the employee experience for that matter.
Kim, what would you say in terms of building the CIO and CMO relationship? What advice would you give?
Yeah, so I'm going to be kind of a broken record. Again, I looked to the CEO. So I did some research with IBM where we went and looked at dyads of highly functioning CIO CMO relationships, and then the opposite, more dysfunctional relationships. One of the key things that we found is that the CIO, and everybody's kind of talking about this, the CIO is really rewarded for making sure that there aren't any mistakes. If there's a breach, if there's a privacy issue, then the CIO is dinged. So they're very risk oriented. The marketer gets in trouble if they don't drive growth. And that pits the two of these people across purposes. To drive growth, I need to move fast and I need to take risks. And so the problem is, how do you align the two? And oftentimes what we found is that when it was really working well together, the CEO would make sure that they had shared goals, shared accountability. You need to get the CIO to think about the business and growth and be somewhat responsible for it. And you need to get the marketer to be cognizant of the risk and to be thinking about that as they're designing growth. And when the two are on the same page, then you end up, you don't have the fighting and you don't have the conflict because they're both rewarded for the same thing.
So the CMO is like move fast and break things, and the CIO is no news is good news. Am I correct in something you work with there?
I think the old school CIO is. I think if you're doing duck and cover as a CIO in 2021 and 2022, then you're not going to be in your role for very long. I love move fast and break things and fail forward. But I think, Kim, you touched on it, or you said it straight out. Shared goals and responsibility, shared success. And to me, that's been the underpinning. And look, at the end of the day, this comes down to human beings establishing good working relationships. You talk about the CIO, CFO, the CIO, the head of HR. There's no stack rank when it comes to my peer relationships. I want to build really good relationships with all of them. And the CMO is no different. I think we can always find common ground. Yep.
Just to quickly pick up on what Kim said.
Go ahead, Miles, please. Yeah.
Just quickly, I was going to say that one of the interesting things we ran in the chat a while back was I asked them, how do you want to be, what metrics and KPIs do you want to use? And they came back and said, we want to be measured the same way the CEO is measured, which is the right way. That's going to drive alignment.
Yeah. Tiffany, your secret to the CIO CMO relationship, how do they build that?
Couldn't agree more on the sort of shared metrics. That's kind of cross-functional, regardless of whether it's CIO, CMO. I think things changed around 2008 when we came out and said, like, all companies are going to become IT companies and tech companies. And CIOs' customers shifted, right? They had internal customers. Now, all of a sudden, they had external customers. And so, I remember a conversation with a drill manufacturer, and they wanted to put an IoT device. This is literally in 08, 09. And they wanted to put an IoT device in there. He's like, okay, now I have a, IoT drill. Isn't that fantastic? And I go, well, are you going to capture the data? And are you going to say to the, user a little app that says, hey, you've been drilling now for 2 hours, you need to do these exercises, or it's time to change your bit, you've used the same one for 55 hours or whatever it might be. They looked at me and they're like, well, why would I do that? And so we've come a long way where the CIO and CMO and just the executive team that's responsible for what are the products we're putting out to market. IT is so deeply embedded in that, from an app perspective, et cetera. So I think part of this is that the customer that the CIO used to be serving maybe was only employees. And now that customer definition has expanded so much that the CMO and the CIO have to become more connected. But I don't want to fly by something Jay said, the role between the CIO, the CMO, and HR on the employee experience of usage of technology and driving that kind of, improved engagement at the employee level. That's another connection point that I think, cannot be ignored when it comes to who the constituents are that the CIO is serving.
I agree 100%. Tiffany said it well. I think if you're a new CIO or you're a newish CIO and you're wondering how to build credibility within your organization, certainly there's the standard things like delivery and uptime and all of those things, which are today table stakes, but it's truly understanding your customer journey. In a number of companies, getting to the front lines, talking to customers, understanding their pain points, learning to speak their language, understanding your entire value chain. Tiffany said it right. We're responsible for the technology. I work for a technology company and I own the technology that we sell from a development perspective and also all the technology that we use internally. And I have to spend time with our customers, and I'm the executive sponsor for 4 of our larger relationships. I want to hear from them on a regular basis, making sure they're happy. What can we be doing better? And just learning constantly about how they use our solutions so that we can be better. And not, well, it was up, we got ping power pipe, you're good, right? To your point, the drill is there, it's got a chip in it. Well, what are you doing with it? What are you doing to make it better? And to me, one way to build credibility with your C-suite, particularly the CMO, is when they know you're on the same wavelength as they are when it comes to customer experience in that customer journey.
What about the idea of tech and digital transformation? Is there some type of technological investment or strategy that can significantly transform the CIO CMO relationship? In other words, can we sprinkle technology over it and make it better? Kim, your sense?
Yeah, again, I'm drawing on this research. One of the things I saw that was really effective is when the CEO would literally drive alignment. Again, I keep coming back. You're seeing that I keep coming back a little bit to the CEO, but where they would drive alignment by having regular meetings. So it's not just having shared goals, but it's then holding them accountable through meetings with the right people, with the CEO being involved in those meetings. Now the CMO and CIO can lead that. They can drive it and they can go get, the right people engaged. And then they're almost like co-leaders on key projects. But a big part of this structurally, part of your question is, are there processes, strategies? It's really around driving structural alignment. One of the things, and this does happen in some companies that I saw was a problem, is when you have the 2 people out of sync structurally, where you might have the CMO reporting to, the COO and the CIO reporting to the CEO, or vice versa, or you have the CIO reporting to the CFO, and then you have this misalignment, which affects the power base of the 2. And I know this seems so obvious, but what I would want, if I were back in practice, I'd want my partner to be at the same level. We're both reporting to the CEO, and then we're having these digital transformation, powwows where the 2 of us are co-leading those conversations. That drives, accountability. It incentivizes collaboration. And those are the types of structural things that can help, push people together a little bit.
Yeah, but, the one thing I'd say there is that personally, this is going to sound strange considering where I work, but we don't have a technology problem. Like, in 2000, 2001 and 2, when I was, very early in this World Wide Web journey, I was a Loqua's beta client. Literally, I was Constant Contact's beta client. literally. And back then there might have been a dozen products in something called, marketing technology, if you will. Salesforce was 2 years old at the time. Now Scott tracks, 8,700 different MarTech products. Like, there is not a technology problem. It's a people process problem. So I know that Miles constantly sees when he's on the CIO chat, I always go, digital transformation is digital as technology, transformation is people and process. And where I see companies get it wrong is when the people and process side is not leveraging all the power of the technology. And so some of that is to Kim's point of alignment, organization, process might be who does what, when, where, and how are they measured, how are the teams? But if you're just doing digital for the sake of checking the box and going, oh, we are now more, I love Ping Power Pop. I haven't heard that in so long. It's so awesome. That if we're sort of watching the network uptime, and that's what we're doing, and you're not sort of thinking about this transformation. And I think everyone on this panel would agree that in the last 18 months, we've seen more digital transformation than we'd see probably in the decade before that, because everybody was kind of holding off, we'll do it. So now the question is, will people go back to the status quo, or will they take this moment in time to really clean up a lot of the people process side of it, as well as the technology side of it?
Couldn't agree more. You read my mind, Tiffany. It's spot on. I think it's people, process, technology in that order. And again, we don't have a technology issue. To me, leaders have to get over themselves. I've had, and I know I'm probably going to irritate about half the CIOs out there. The other half will be like, really? Because I, at one point, reported at a prior company to the CFO, and I've had so many CIOs say, well, Jay, I would never do that. I would never do that. I said, look, normally in a prior life, I would have said that too. However, in this case, I met him. He was a solid leader. He understood technology. In this company, it made sense. I think as CIOs, sometimes we have a little bit of an inferiority complex where if we're not, quote, at the table, we're not at the same level. I do agree that leveling, certainly equal leveling, does absolutely help. But we got to get over ourselves as leaders and just be the first one to extend the hand, or at least socially distanced 6 feet away, but extend the hand and reach out to the CMO and create those shared goals and not get worried about turf and all of that stuff. It always starts with just two professionals sitting down and crafting shared goals. There's more than enough success to go around. There's more than enough technology to go around. There's more than enough glory or whatever you want out of your role, but just get over yourself and get to work.
Jay,
I'm not surprised that it is a human issue, not a tech issue. Kim, go ahead, please, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jay, maybe perhaps I miscommunicated a little bit. Sometimes the problem is not necessarily with the CMO or CIO, but if the CIO is embedded underneath the CFO's objectives are not necessarily customer centric, they're cost based. And that puts additional pressure on the CIO, and it drives a little bit of misalignment. It makes trying to drive alignment more difficult. If the two report to the same person, even if the two are reporting to the CFO, then at least they have kind of the same goals and objectives, or they're within the same system. It's how do you drive alignment? And sometimes that misleveling is a problem, but sometimes reporting to different leaders can drive additional.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think it does. It absolutely matters, right? It absolutely matters. So I do agree with you. Don't misunderstand me. I think, though, that we tend to make, although it does matter, I think we tend to let our egos sometimes get the best of us and blind us to the fact that we can still be effective, even with maybe a suboptimal construct. But you're right. It does add a huge degree of difficulty to the relationship.
It's interesting. You caused me to have a flash, an aha moment. But a long time ago, a lot of CIOs were under the CFO, and if you think about it, historically, the CIO was about automating back office processes. But now that CIOs are focused on the front end of the business, how does revenue get generated? Are we doing sufficiently? I mean, I've been talking to enterprise architects lately who are doing the maps of the customer journey so that marketing can figure out where its gaps are and things like that in systems. So it just seems that the aha moment is CIOs shouldn't ever work now for the CFO. They need to be working as a peer of the CMO. in order for it to work effectively. Message for the CEO.
Miles, I thought you were going to I was hoping you might disagree with everyone and say, no, it's not a human issue, it's a technology issue. And here's a technology fix. But I was disappointed. You said it's a human issue as well. There's no technology that can magically fix this?
You know, we've said it over and over again in the chat that no, technology can't fix a human problem. The human problems have to be fixed. And as hard as technology issues may be, you have to fix the people issues. I remember on the first chat I ran, somebody, gave the classic Peter Drucker quote, that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And it really is true. I mean, you can't do all this great whizzy technology without alignment and shared objectives.
Digital transformation can't happen without cultural transformation, period, full stop. It can't. And it's not a technology challenge, it's a culture challenge. That's just it.
So let's look to the future of the CIO CMO partnership. I may say, a few years, maybe, mid-decade. Tiffany, what do you see there?
Well, I realize the conversation is CIO CMO, so forgive me for what I'm about to say, but the relationship should not stop there. I feel the same way about bringing in your chief sales officer or chief revenue officer and your chief customer service or customer success officer. Like, the power couple is those four, not CIO and CMO. And, Kim and I could probably have an hour-long conversation about who owns customer experience and who drives growth. Is it the CMO or the CR? Like, at the end of the day, it's kind of all four of them, right? And I often it's hard for me because I always get this CMO driving growth and the CIO. And, until the CMO carries quota, I sort of say we need to expand the conversation because sales is driving sales. Marketing is driving funnel and brand. And if you're an e-commerce brand, they're doing a lot of selling without a human potentially. Like, I get that, right? And then customer service or customer success is about, don't just get a customer and lose them. You want to keep them and upsell them. And so that CIO is the sort of connective glue between those because of the technology. But the reality is, and this is from a Tableau study, that it's like the average enterprise has like 900 apps and a low 20% of them are integrated. So that is not a technology problem. So imagine working across all of that. Like that, the CIO should be like, oh my God, I'm forcing my people to go into 5 systems and the data's not clean. It's not, it's not valuable, all of that. And there's no way that anybody can do that without the CIO getting on board of understanding that interdependency between not only marketing, but marketing and sales, not only marketing and sales, but marketing, sales, and customer service. So I like to broaden it a little bit more. I know this was very narrow to CMO and CIO, but I would be remiss because I just think that that's one step, but that's not the end of the conversation, right? It has to go sort of the whole way.
Jay, your prediction about the future of the CIO CMO relationship, is it going to be seamless in the years ahead?
No, I mean, it's never seamless. It should be. It really should be. I think as you're seeing more and more CIOs spring from the ranks of non-custom or non-computer science, you're seeing them come from MIS, from marketing, from a variety of backgrounds. Heck, I was going to be a lawyer. I'm a lifelong IT guy, but my background is political science, and I was a hobbyist as a kid. And to me, luckily, I went back and got my graduate degree and made my mother happy when I decided not to go to law school. But
good move, Jay.
Yeah, she talks to me again. It's great. But I mean, I feel like the more we focus, the more CIOs remember that they are business executives, the more the relationship's going to be strengthened. Tiffany nailed it. It is beyond just the chief marketing officer. When I look at who my biggest customers are internally, they're all equal. I mean, they are all equal. But yeah, those who are carrying quota, those who are dealing with the customer. I look at operations, customer success, everything. And to Tiffany's point, I look and watch what our employees have to go through because we're a company of companies and we're learning how to integrate now. I watch what they have to go through, and it curls my hair because I'm like, gosh, they're flipping through all of these different systems just to give somebody an answer. The CIO is in charge of that. You can lead that, and if you reduce that friction, it's going to pay huge dividends internally, but also for your customers. So to me, I think the CIO has no choice but to continue to reach across the aisle, break down the silos, and work with the CMO the best way that he or she can.
Kim, your sense of the future of the CIO CMO relationship?
Yeah, I apologize. We've got a thunderstorm. My dog is crying. So
It's all part of it. Yeah.
It's all the reality that we live in today.
We're going to see if my technology holds up here. So a couple things that I noticed, we've talked a lot about the role splintering. Like you take a territory and then you split it between CMO, et cetera, and you parse it out. What I've found in my research is that the bigger the company, the more they splinter those roles, that it almost is an artifact of size of firm, that they recognize that, you may be managing 5,000 global employees, but they've given you a narrow sliver of the pie. And so, smaller companies, oftentimes you have a very broad territory span of responsibility, but as the company gets bigger, it gets narrower. And so when I talk about CMO, I'm generally talking about all of the responsibilities that a marketer should have, regardless of who's managing it or how many pieces it's split into. And I think that kind of addresses Tiffany's point. But one of the things I'm very bullish about the future is this blending of skills and better perspective taking. So the more the marketer can understand technology, and we're starting in school to try to help, cross-pollinate that understanding, the more that the technologists can understand marketing earlier. So even before they leave school, they have that kind of insight that I think it will help facilitate a better relationship longer term. In my dyads, the groups that did really well, there's one where the CIO was an ex-marketer and the CMO was an engineer.
Oh.
And now, by the way, that CIO has left the company and he's now CMO and CIO of a company. And I think that sort of respect and understanding and appreciation for the other role, which we're trying to hopefully facilitate at an earlier age, will pay dividends to companies in the future.
I agree. I think CIOs, CMOs have no choice, nor should they want to not grow closer and closer together. There's 100% alignment between the goal around customer experience. The CIO has an equal say in that and equal impact as the CMO and the rest of the C-suite in their organizations. If you focus on customer experience, the customer journey, you can cross over in data, you can cross over on the technology, et cetera. But as long as you keep that North Star of customer experience, attracting and retaining customers, you have a lot to talk about. You have a lot to align around. So it just, it baffles me how it doesn't happen in some companies.
I'm two thoughts. One is obviously we need to teach more executive data skills because that becomes still a problem. But I keep thinking, as both Kimberly and Tiffany were talking about Theodore Levitt's marketing imagination, where he said the job of a company is to create and keep a customer. I think all of those roles, if they all shared that objective of creating and keeping a customer, then everybody would align on it because that's what the goal is. They'd be taking the friction out, as Jay said, and driving a great experience.
It's going to be interesting to watch in the years ahead, to be sure. I think this is a long conversation that could go on, but I think we're basically at time. I thank the four of you, and I definitely learned something. Thanks for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. Great to be here.